Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. Canton, Ohio, Thursday, April 18th, 2024, 8:15 p.m. On the evening of April 18th, a motorist had struck a utility pole with his car.
We have multiple PD units. We have a sheared-off pole in the middle of the street just east of Warner.
Police were called to the scene of the downed power pole where they found an unoccupied vehicle. People who were there said that the driver had left and went to a nearby AmVets lodge. When the police got to the lodge, they found 53-year-old Frank Tyson. Mr. Tyson seemed to be agitated and acting strangely, but not violently. Police, however, chose to escalate the situation, choosing to confront Mr. Tyson rather than try to talk reasonably with him. There's tons of videos of police online you can watch right now, and even with people who are being violent with them, they'll normally try to talk them down. If they're not black, that is. But if they are black, they'll jump on them, which is what happened here. One of the white men at the AmVets actually joined in with the police assaulting Mr. Tyson. That's important to note because police are always whining and complaining that they don't want citizens to interfere with a police action, that they don't want citizens to video them, and they demand laws that require citizens to remain several yards away from the police even when they're attacking a citizen. And yet, in this case, you had a white civilian who, without the police even asking, decided to play pretend cop in this case and jump on Mr. Tyson as well, and the police didn't mind. Nobody whining about, well, citizens need to stay back while the police are working. Gee, I wonder why. During the encounter, Mr. Tyson says, "They're trying to kill me, they're trying to kill me." He shouts, "Call the sheriff," several more times and continues to say, "They're trying to kill me." As part of this attack, the police were on Mr. Tyson's back and even on his neck, even after everybody knows that is potentially fatal. Mr. Tyson told the assailants that he couldn't breathe. Now, this is 4 years after George Floyd, so what do you think the police did? They told Mr. Tyson that he was fine and he just needed to calm down. One of the assailants, possibly this third individual who joined in with the police, was screaming expletives at Mr. Tyson. And just to show the cops' contempt for Mr. Tyson wasn't accidental, they were joking with the bystanders and going through Mr. Tyson's wallet. One of the assailants says at one point, "I've always wanted to be in a bar fight. I don't know if this counts." It would be several more minutes before they even bothered to notice that their victim wasn't responsive. When they finally stopped joking long enough to see that Mr. Tyson was indeed in medical distress, they tried to do, they claimed, CPR, and they actually, in this case, remarkably summoned medical assistance, which is something the police almost never do. But it was too late, of course. Mr. Tyson would be declared dead at the hospital from cardiac arrest. Mr. Tyson's death has been ruled a homicide. Cardiopulmonary arrest in association with physical altercation and prone restraint. In other words, having kept this man on his stomach for so long, which, by the way, the Justice Department has routinely told police not to do, this contributed to the man's death. It also didn't help that he had 3 punks who were on his back and his neck for an extended period of time. Predictably, the white media has chosen to completely overlook the coroner's report as it relates to the cardiopulmonary arrest from the physical altercation and the prone restraint, and instead, the white media has chosen to focus almost exclusively on the coroner's notation that they had detected cocaine in Mr. Tyson's system. This is, of course, put out there so that the Ben Shapiros can claim that Mr. Tyson really died from a drug overdose, even though the coroner's report clearly states that having 3 inbreds on his back and his neck for an extended period of time is what actually killed him. Now, for a lot of these white supremacists, starting with the white media, they're hoping to make this case a do-over of the George Floyd murder. They hate taking an L, and the aftermath of the Floyd murder case was a huge L for them. This is about pushing the envelope and reestablishing that any flimsy excuse or claim of wrongdoing should be enough to allow a thug with a badge to kill a black person. But by far in this case, the one thing the white media wanted to place the most supreme emphasis on was a report that Mr. Tyson had served a prison sentence previously. The 2 assailants who killed him, they're of course wearing tons of questionable tattoos. Naturally, the white media makes no attempt to identify these tattoos or whether they indicate that these 2 were affiliated with any sort of racist or criminal organizations. Now, we don't know what the priors of his killers are. What are their disciplinary records? How many citizens' complaints for use of force or conduct unbecoming do they have? We don't know, and the white media isn't asking, and that's deliberate. In the case of Adam Coy, who I told you about last week, he was also an Ohio police officer who was convicted of murder, And that thug had more than 36 citizens' complaints against him, yet nothing was ever done about him. Derek Chauvin had numerous citizens' complaints for police brutality as well, long before he murdered George Floyd. Daniel Pantaleo had numerous citizens' complaints against him long before he murdered Eric Garner. In fact, Pantaleo had been successfully sued twice for police brutality and racial profiling, with the city of New York being forced to pay $100,000 to settle those suits against him. But when the white media talks about the victims of the police, we never hear about the cops' dirty records. Instead, we hear loose talk about cigarettes or counterfeit bills or whatever. Nothing that would make anyone say, hey, these cops here have committed crimes far worse than the black person that they killed. Maybe we need to be looking at them. This is social engineering done through the use of repetitive propaganda. This is societal conditioning. Before they even report on the story, they've already conditioned you to have a certain set of predetermined expectations about what they're going to say. And it's all done in order to justify killing a black person, because they never use these narratives when the victim is white. And if it's a black officer who kills a white suspect, then they flip the script entirely, and they'll tell you every little detail and criticism about that black officer. But even if the white person they harmed had a drug and criminal record long as your arm, you'll never hear about it. What the white media is going to try is to stack the deck against the deceased. They're feeling like there's been just enough time that's passed since the uprisings of 2020 that maybe they can start getting bold again with the character assassinations of these black victims of police violence. When the police kill a white person, we never hear about their priors or drug abuse or anything negative. It's just so-and-so white person died in police custody, the officers are on paid leave pending an investigation, and that's it. No attempts are ever made to justify killing them, or to smear them, or to otherwise signal to the public that this white person deserved it. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment, Power Tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power Tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. Now, another predictable aspect of this tragic incident is that Benjamin Crump is on the scene. That guy's never late. And he's out there, of course, self-promoting. What else would you expect? Now, before I go any farther, I want to make this very clear. I'm not putting on the cape for Mr. Tyson. It's far too soon for that. And if you watched last week's crime report, you know exactly the reason why. But the reason that I'm telling you about this case in particular now is because there's an overarching point that you need to be aware of. It's no coincidence that this happened where it did and when it did. The brother of Andre Hill not only expressed sympathy for the police who killed his brother, but even expressed appreciation for them. Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy, so when the police see their victims expressing anything other than hostility and indignation, this only serves to embolden their criminality. As white supremacy sees it, everything happens on a continuum, and the trend is only going one of two ways, in their direction or away from them. After all the L's they've taken the last few years, they know the trend is solidly against them, so their single-minded goal has been to reverse the trend. But they can't do it alone. They need some simple-minded Negroes to help them do it. And in the case of the family of Andre Hill, that's exactly what happened. And we see that this is the result. As far as the police are concerned, this gave them an opening, and they're trying to see how far they can take things. As I told you last week, police in Ohio have a very well-earned reputation for being mindless thugs. This indictment came down a couple of days before the conviction of Adam Coy, who murdered Andre Hill in cold blood. He was convicted on all counts, including murder, and it's pretty obvious that he would have been convicted from the beginning, but we see in this case, as the black media's told you, these prosecutors are trying to tiptoe their way back to the old normal, giving low-ball charges, or just no charges at all, because the maximum charges against the killers of Mr. Tyson makes it where they might serve 3 years, maybe. This is the point that they've been trying to reach for the last few years. Incidents like this are not rare at all. They're commonplace because the police make them commonplace. The police take normal, otherwise passive situations and they convert them into dangerous and often fatal incidents. There was no reason to have guns drawn on Andre Hill or Tamir Rice. And when Mr. Tyson said that he couldn't breathe, there was no reason to ignore him either, except they did. The police constantly commit these crimes over and over again because they recognize that they're part of an apparatus of anti-black violence that is sanctioned and encouraged by racist politicians, with the murders being justified by the white media if they think they can get away with it. And if the evidence is simply too damning or smearing the victim isn't an option, then the white media will try to ignore the kill in the hopes that the public will forget about it and the prosecutors will be able to offer the killers a sweetheart plea deal or even drop the charges without anyone noticing. Police have one of the safest jobs in America. Check out the Bureau of Labor Statistics if you want to know how much safer their job is than, say, sanitation workers. Yet the police are constantly complaining that if they don't get to do policing the way that they want to, why, the cities are going to become war zones. The problem is that thugs like these punks are the ones who the police departments want. They have a choice as to who it is they hire, but they prefer criminals like this. When the police have job openings announced, large numbers of people turn out to apply because these are state jobs that pay well and have guaranteed pensions after only 20 years, which is a far shorter duration than most other occupations. When you hear someone from the Pig Patrol whining that nobody wants to be a cop, that's a lie. There's plenty of people who want the job and would do it according to the law. But policing is an arena that was established and is occupied by white supremacy. And when white power takes something, they desperately try not to lose it. And why is it that the politicians don't do anything about it? It's because corrupt cops protect corrupt politicians. One hand washes the other. What happened to Mr. Tyson was not merely homicide, it was murder. When he said that he couldn't breathe, it was undeniable that he was in distress. But his killers not only ignored his pleas, they also mocked him and joked about what they had done. That's depraved indifference. Police lie all the time about how dangerous it would be if they hesitated to use their guns on someone. That's a phony police union lie, and they know it. But you want to know what's not a lie? When citizens hesitate to protect themselves from a police attack, they die. And when you look at how many people, black people, the police kill with complete impunity, you realize that the people who need to be protected are the citizens. Speaking of which, citizens have a right to protect their friends and neighbors or even strangers from being murdered by the police. Citizens know only too well the difference between proper policing or even proper use of force and police brutality. And when citizens are saying that they cannot breathe, or when citizens can see that the police are brutalizing someone, then they have a right to assist. And we can't allow anyone to intimidate us otherwise. Police are by and large cowards, and when you see police who go into politics, you see their cowardice on full display. It's usually these former thugs with badges who become politicians and begin agitating for laws that criminalize videotaping the police committing their crimes, or try to criminalize standing quote-unquote too close to the police. Unless, of course, you're helping the police to assault someone, then it's all fine. Apparently, they're scared that some citizen's going to do something to the police. There's no examples of this ever having happened, by the way, but police and their apologists lie full-time through their crooked teeth and claim that they're under constant threat of citizens attacking them, which is a lie, but nobody ever calls them out on it, and that's deliberate. The white media's job is to be a mouthpiece for white supremacy. You have an endless list of cases of police murdering black citizens, and in practically every case, there's bystanders present, and not once have they interfered with the police's actions, even though they should in many cases, such as the murder of George Floyd and countless others. All these laws they propose are meant to intimidate the public from stopping police criminality. It's meant to make citizens hesitate when they see the police committing crimes, and when citizens hesitate, they get killed. These laws are not meant to protect police from an unruly and violent public because the police are not being attacked. These laws are simply meant to cower people into silence and to get them to accept police brutality without any sort of opposition. Police have no right to expect anyone to comply with an unlawful request, and citizens are definitely under no obligation to allow themselves to be killed by the police. In fact, they have a moral obligation to stop criminals with badges from committing their crimes. When you have a situation like the one we have in America, where the police routinely ignore the law and even egregiously break it and make jokes while they're doing it, citizens are under no obligation to do nothing in the face of this constant lawlessness. In fact, citizens have an obligation to restore law and order. This is what's been going on in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's America. This is why 2024 is on track to be the deadliest year of police killings since they took office, with numbers significantly higher than it was when the Orange Man was in the White House. And you haven't heard Kamala or Biden say a word about this trend, but they did make sure to float millions of dollars to the police, including, I believe, illegally misdirecting COVID funds to the thugs in blue, and they made sure not to require any sort of policy or procedural changes for police departments or prosecutors to get that money. When Biden wanted to go after black people with his 94 crime bill, or Biden's law as he called it, he made sure to attach federal dollars to that law as a way to incentivize the states to rewrite their own criminal statutes and bring them into line with what Biden wanted them to be. He could have done the same thing with the money for the police, but that was the entire point. He's trying to incentivize going after black people and not the police who are committing the crimes. Mr. Tyson isn't the first black person since George Floyd to have died while being attacked by the police. And so long as we have black people who are making excuses for police brutality, or worse, expressing appreciation for police brutality, he won't be the last. We have to make it clear the thugs in blue and their collaborators in the DA's offices won't be allowed to slither their way back to the old normal. We have taken significant ground from white power, and we're going to make sure the bastards don't get it back. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Pamela Hyman, Wesley Monroe, Aaron Ray, Williams, and Rowlett Churchwell. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.